tuned in. This is TMH Daily English News. The headlines for today: rights group charge ethnic cleansing in Western Tigray and finally name the perpetrators. Canada reiterates its call for peace and negotiations and an inclusive national dialogue within Ethiopia. And the government of Tigray has also called for a stop to disinformation regarding the flow of humanitarian aid into the Tigray region. Moving on to the main stories for today, the government of Tigray has called for a stop to disinformation regarding the flow of humanitarian aid into the Tigray region, as the government of Tigray, in a statement released today, said only 26 aid trucks have so far entered Tigray since the announcement of cessation of hostilities 14 days ago. The statement added that this is an indication that the siege and the blockade has continued in name of a cessation of hostilities, and the government of Tigray also noted that the Ethiopian authorities are disseminating false information regarding the uninterrupted flow of aid into the region. The statement emphasized that even some of the international communities are echoing the same misinformation, adding that the duty on their part is claiming that none of the existent free flow of humanitarian aid is encouraging. The government of Tigray called for the stop to such disinformation and wordplay and urged the international community to put enough pressure on the Ethiopian government to end the siege and the blockade and to resume public services as well. The government of Tigray has once again expressed to the people of Tigray that the international community's commitment to do whatever is necessary and to ensure unfettered flow of humanitarian aid into region should be applicable. The rights group call for an ethnic cleansing in the western part of Ethiopia's Tigray region. Amnesty International, alongside Human Rights Watch, said in a joint report that abuses by the Amhara officials and the regional special forces, as well as the militias in western Tigray, amounted to war crimes and crimes against humanity in whole. They also accused that Ethiopia's military of complicity in such acts. Timnit Bayru presents the story compiled by reports by the rights group as well as the Associated Press.
Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch said in a joint report that abuses by Amhara officials and regional special forces and militias in western Tigray amounted to war crimes and crimes against humanity. They also accused Ethiopia's military of complicity in these acts. Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch on Wednesday released a joint report titled, "We Will Erase You from This Land." The report details ethnic cleansing, campaigns and abuses carried out since November 2020 as a part of a widespread and systematic attack against the Tigrayan civilian population that amount to war crimes against humanity, as well as war crimes. According to the rights groups, the crimes were perpetrated by security officials and civilian authorities from the neighboring Amhara region, sometimes with the possible participation of Ethiopian federal forces. The report, the result of months-long investigation, including more than 400 interviews, charges that hundreds of thousands of Tigrayans have been forced to leave their homes in a violent campaign of unlawful killings, sexual assaults, mass arbitrary detentions, livestock pillaging, and the denial of humanitarian assistance.
The Dansha mayor, he kept telling us that we need to move, that we don't belong to stay here.
The report said with the outbreak of the war, Amhara regional forces, along with the Ethiopian federal forces, seized these territories and displaced Tigrayan civilians in brutal ethnic cleansing campaign.
When the Ethiopian and Amhara forces entered the town, people were panicked and began running to the farms. They started killing people. No warning, just shooting. They shot at people running.
Soon, an interim administration for the Western Tigray was established by forces from the neighboring Amhara region, an administration hostile to the presence of Tigrayans.
Papers said Tigrayans need to leave the town immediately. They were thrown everywhere. So when we woke up in the morning, you should see it on your door or on the way to church. Everywhere.
Local officials in meetings discussed plans to remove Tigrayans. According to the report, pamphlets appeared to give Tigrayans urgent ultimatums to leave or be killed, the report says. They documented the sexual enslavement and gang rape of Tigrayan women. One woman has to say,
I was in Dansha town, where I have a hairdressing shop. 6 militia came to loot my shop. 2 of them raped me. They said, "You Tigrayan, you should disappear from the land west of Takaza. You are evil, and we are purifying your blood." The militia would even write on the houses that belong to Tigrayans, "This is ours. This is Amhara house." They told us not to speak in Tigrinya.
The Human Rights Watch dogs also gathered testimony about the death of Tigrayans in overcrowded prisons and the summary execution of about 60 men by the Takaza River.
The Amara Special Forces told us to disembark. They lined us up in rows, cocked their guns, and sprayed us with bullets. We fell in the ditch below. After that, they said, "Tigrayans don't die easily. Shoot again."
After seeing this and other incidents, I thought, what are we expecting? Are we waiting for them to kill all of us? Why don't we cross the Takaza River while we still have our lives?
We could not access the toilets. All of us went through it. Tigrayans in western Tigray continue to be subjected to torture, arbitrary detention, and other grave human rights abuses. The U.S. Secretary of State, Anthony Blinken, asserted in March 2021 that ethnic cleansing had taken place in western Tigray, marking the first time a top official in the international community openly described the situation as such. The allegation was dismissed by the Ethiopian authorities as completely unfounded and spurious verdict against the Ethiopian government. The Associated Press, however, said the new report corroborates its reporting on atrocities in the war, which affect 6 million people in Tigray alone. Among their recommendations, the rights groups call for a neutral protection force in western Tigray, possibility with the deployment of an African Union-backed peacekeeping mission, with robust civilian protection mandate. Their report also urges the UN Security Council to impose an arms embargo targeting all the warring parties.
In related news, within this report, the perpetrators have been named. The rights watchdogs have named 3 individuals as responsible for some of the war crimes committed against the civilians within the western Tigray region. The 3 names in this report are Colonel Demek Azodu, the Deputy Administrator and Head of Security of the Western Tigray Zone, Dejena Maru, also known as Shalaka, the commander of the 2nd Battalion of the Gafat Brigade, as well as the Amhara Special Forces, and Belai Ayalo, who's believed to be the intelligence officer who's based in Humera. The report said these are the main persons who should be held accountable for crimes against international law for their roles in facilitating war crimes of murder, torture, sexual violence, and amongst many others. Speaking to the East African, Letitia Bader, the Horn of Africa director at the Human Rights Watch, called for an independent probe on their individual command roles to determine their direct involvement in these documented crimes. We call on the Ethiopian government to immediately investigate them and suspend them from their positions of power where they continue to commit crimes against their civilians. Given the gravity of the crimes documented in the report, both Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International have further called on the International Commission of Human Rights and their experts on Ethiopia to include events in Western Tigray from November of 2020 as part of their investigation. They said this will help identify more individuals responsible where possible and make recommendations on how they can be held accountable through local, regional, but most importantly, international justice bodies, including the ICC. International correspondent Barry Malone lauded to the 2 rights groups for painstakingly documenting the horrific campaign of these ethnic cleansings that took place in Western Tigray. He goes to tweet and say, "In more than 20 years in journalism, I don't think anything has made me feel more ashamed of the profession than the paucity of coverage this current war has gotten." Rashid Abdi, on his part, noted that the document ethnic cleansing in Western Tigray is also part of a long-term strategy by the Amhara state to annex all of its territory. He tweeted, "Amhara state is laying down the bureaucracy of permanent sovereignty, wants federal parliament and judiciary to bless and legalize," as he added. Fasaha Tekla, Amnesty International researcher, said despite Ethiopian Human Rights Commission's claim, there's a fundamental difference between the rights group's findings as well as the joint investigation by the Commission and its UN counterpart. Fasaha Tekla of Amnesty International said, Our findings are clear that there has been a sustained and coordinated campaign of abuses to cleanse ethnic Tigrayans from that entire zone. The international community, in their part, also put their 2 cents in, and Canada has reiterated its call once again for peace negotiations and an inclusive national dialogue within the entirety of Ethiopia. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau spoke with Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed on the phone yesterday. According to a readout from the office of the Premier Trudeau, the 2 leaders discussed recent developments in the ongoing conflict in the northern region of Ethiopia. Prime Minister Trudeau emphasized the importance of the announcement by the government of Ethiopia on the 24th of March of an indefinite humanitarian truce and called for further access as well as delivery of humanitarian assistance to those affected by this conflict. The Prime Minister Trudeau reiterated Canada's strong and ongoing commitment to supporting a peaceful resolution to the conflict, including negotiations towards a peace agreement as well. The minister underscored the importance of taking all steps necessary to address accountability and justice for any human rights violations alleged to have occurred during this conflict. The Prime Minister also discussed Russia's illegal and unjustifiable invasion of Ukraine and its impacts on the global peace and security, agreed to stay in close touch with the Prime Minister. In other news, UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres called on all parties to keep the momentum and follow through on their commitments to facilitate the provision of humanitarian aid. Guterres tweeted, "I welcome the news that the trucks with food assistance and fuel have reached Tigray and the Afar region following the declaration of the humanitarian truce within Ethiopia." But member of Tigray Armed Forces Central Command, Getachew Reda, said the only UN convoy consisting of just 20 trucks made it into Tigray almost 2 weeks ago. There hasn't been progress since the news, Mr. UNSG, as he tweeted on his official Twitter account, reacting to UN Secretary General's tweet as well. The Catholic Eparchy of Adigrat calls for a swift humanitarian aid action to save millions of people dying from merciless man-made famine in the Tigray region. The Catholic Eparchy of Adigrat made the call in a statement it released yesterday. The statement said the current pace to deliver the promises on the ground is not bringing any meaningful change for the lives of the people who have been under siege and complete blockage for over 500 days. It described the intensity of the humanitarian crisis as life and death en masse for millions of people, and the statement noted that 1.7 million children across Tigray have been deprived of education within the last 2 years. It stated that professionals who have been contributing to the development of the country, including doctors, university lecturers, engineers, teachers, etc., are deprived of accessing their own assets, leading them to beg for survival. It added that thousands are currently dying with preventable man-made hunger as well as disease. The Catholic Eparchy made the dire call on the international community and concerned UN agencies to come to the millions and millions of people that are currently on the verge of death. Our final update for today, the UN General Assembly suspends Russia's participation in the UN Human Rights Council. 93 countries currently voted in favor of the move, while 24 countries, including Ethiopia as well as Eritrea, opposed it, and 58 countries abstained from the vote completely. That concludes our news for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. Bye-bye.